Welcome into the best damn college football show out there. Tuesday, December 15th. It is championship week in college football. We got Robbie Veno, number one in totals at WagerTalk.com for the whole year of 2020. Really good handicapper, top two overall at WagerTalk and SportsMemo.com. But without further ado, Robbie, welcome in. Happy championship week to you.
Yeah, it's a great time of year, Drew. We were just chatting a hair bit off air, but with the bowl games coming up, shame that we get our very first bowl game canceled right off the bat. SMU and Texas San Antonio. Frisco Bowl goes by the wayside, but we'll have plenty this month to choose from, along with this list of championship games Friday through Saturday here, Drew. Quite a few good matchups, some double-digit spreads, but still some anticipated matchups. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on here this weekend.
Absolutely. And welcome in if you're watching live simulcast on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. We got Lucas in the house, Booga Bets as here as well. Championship week, guys. We're talking Pac-12 championship first, Friday night action, Oregon versus USC. Then we're going to hit the Saturday card with three championship games here. One being in the American Athletic Conference, Tulsa versus Cincinnati. We also got Clemson versus Notre Dame in the ACC, and the Sun Belt Championship, my personal favorite, Louisiana at Coastal Carolina to end it. We'll get a best bet as well. So, guys, that's the schedule for today's show. Hopefully you like it. Now we're going to dig into the analysis from a betting perspective. If you're liking the content, please smash the like button. If you're watching live, guys, come join us in the chat box. And if you're watching on replay, that's cool too. Feel free to drop a comment below on the YouTube channel, and always interested in reading those. But Robbie, let's get after it. Friday night lights action here. Pac-12 championship game. This one on Fox, 8 p.m. Eastern kick, 5 p.m. Pacific here from the LA Coliseum, guys. The USC Trojans will be the home team here playing in their home stadium. Friday night lights here. Oregon, USC, 62.5 being the total. USC Trojans -3 in the hook, -3.5 point favorites here at home for the Pac-12 championship here. Robbie, what are you thinking with the Ducks versus the Trojans?
Well, it's a nice way to get in, right? If you're Oregon, have Washington come down with COVID, and you get named as the alternate. For Washington, for those who don't know, not only could they not meet the threshold of 53 players available for the game, but how about this? They had
Zero.
zero offensive linemen for
Yeah.
which is crazy. You listen to some talk nationally here within the last 12, 18 hours, Drew, and, um, they almost consider Oregon as a team that isn't as deserving as Washington. I think when we listen to national talk, they go by one-loss records, but certainly odds makers don't see it that way. USC opened up 7 against Washington, and when Oregon got named their opponent, that number went right down to 3.5. So certainly, those of us in the college football betting community see Oregon as the higher power rated team, the tougher challenge for USC in this game. But let's get into some of the fundamentals here, Drew. And last week's USC UCLA game, I think, shines a pretty good light on what we'll see here this week in this particular contest. And for those of you who don't know, don't make the same mistake I made as soon as this game was announced. I went immediately Sunday to check San Francisco, California weather because this game is generally played at Levi Stadium. But this is a home game for USC. So, unlike those years where we saw bad weather in a Pac 12 title game, not going to see it here. For this contest, you're looking at mid to upper 60s at the start. Remember, once again, as I go through some of the small little details here, Drew, but remember that this is a 5 o'clock Pacific start, 8 o'clock East Coast, 5 o'clock Pacific. Still daylight somewhat at that point in time. Mid to upper 60s to start the game. Maybe they find their way to the low 50s throughout the game. Figure an 8:30 conclusion. You'll have great temperatures. You have no wind. You have no rain. It's a fast track for these two teams. Um, the Oregon UCLA comparison here, and why I want to go to last week's game, because both of these teams, Oregon and UCLA, although they run different systems, Chip Kelly's system is different than offensive coordinator Joe Moorhead's system at Oregon. But the end goal is the same for both of these guys. They want to be able to run the football first and throw off of a successful running attack. Joe Moorhead will do it with a little bit more vertical stuff. Chip Kelly might do it with a few more of his screens and shorter passes. But generally speaking, they want to get to the same end game here. And last week against USC, UCLA goes for 549 total yards. They ran the ball 43 times. They threw it 36. They go 30 for 36 through the air. For Dorian Thompson Robinson, 30 for 36. I didn't look to see if it's the best game of his career, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say
Probably.
it was the best game of his career, pass completion percentage wise. So UCLA had it all working. I mean, it's a game that ended in devastating fashion if you're UCLA. Certainly very good if you're USC. But the point here being UCLA did whatever they wanted to in that game. 5 of their touchdown drives were for 61 yards or more, whereas USC in that contest had 3 drives of 75 yards or more. They scored 2 touchdowns off of turnovers, where they set them up in good field position, right? 30 and 31-yard drives. But USC, in typical USC 2020 fashion, digs a hole and comes out of that hole with a late rally. Second half, I think they scored on 5 of 7 possessions in the second half, get themselves the win. I think Oregon, Drew, has better skill talent than UCLA does, at least if you're talking about depth-wise, where UCLA has Felton, a tremendous running back, running the football, while DTR is a nice dual-threat quarterback, while they might have one number one receiver. Oregon's got multiple threats in all of those positions, except for quarterback, of course. But I would say that Tyler Shuck, while he might not be as explosive running the football, certainly Oregon runs it with him, and he's a good runner. The receiving core for USC to have to deal with Jalen Red, Michael Pittman, Johnny Johnson, the running attack when you're dealing with CJ Verdell and company. It's a tough assignment here. So I think Oregon offensively should have a big day. The next question is, can Oregon stop anybody offensively? And unless you're named California, the answer has been no. They did a pretty good defensive job against Cal, but Cal is hopeless on offense. Cal sneaks out a win in that game. But USC's air raid probably causes a lot of difficulty for Oregon here as well. Keaton Slovis and his crew of receivers going to be trouble for Oregon, especially, guys, because Oregon gets no pass rush this year. You know, even with Thibodeau at defensive end, they get no pass rush. 7 sacks for their entire season, although it's an abbreviated season. And 4 of those sacks came against Chase Garbers in California. So otherwise, only 3 sacks. Every team that's played them with an explosive offense has dinged them pretty good. Like I say, with good weather, this game opens 62. I have to believe that 31-31 to get you to the number is more than doable. And then somebody's got to win the game. So 34-31 probably gets you over. I don't see it being played out any other way, Drew, except in a high scoring shootout. I don't think that USC can correct the defensive problems that they have within, this 6-day period, Saturday, in fact, all year long until now. And the same goes for Oregon. Although Oregon had a week off, let's remember Oregon was prepping for Colorado when they got the call to come play USC for the championship game. So preparations changed. Certainly they have enough time, right? They get the call Monday. So you get 4 days to switch gears and go ahead and prep for USC. I think they'll be fine there. But both of these teams, they've lived off of offense for the majority of the season. I think both of these teams continue to live on offense. The running back situation at USC, where maybe Malachi doesn't play, really doesn't matter. Stephen Carr and the backups are very capable for this team. Kristen, speed back. So I think both these teams will be fine. I look for a pretty high scoring game. And if you like total, I really wouldn't wait around because this is a Friday game. You're likely to see some increased movement on this. There's no bad weather coming. I think at 62, 62 and a half right now. perhaps we see this thing reach 64. We know how these games, spread wise and total wise, when they're on shorter cards, how these numbers tend to fly. So, if you like over now, I think you should play it now.
Robbie, great breakdown there. I mean, coming into this game, I was leaning towards USC, but I didn't want to lay that hook on the 3. So I was going to kind of wait it out and see if the money came back on the Oregon Ducks and could grab USC at 3, if not even less. Doubt that that's going to happen, especially with USC being the home team. But you make a great case here towards the over. 62.5 is pretty much the prevailing number out there, guys, as we're talking right now. Again, if you're watching on replay, we're talking about 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesday. So we have a couple days here till kick. Weather looks to be good. Robbie, you make a good case, and I agree with you in terms of both offensive units being the stronger unit than their opposition's defense. I guess I would just somewhat question, pace isn't always there for the USC side. And to tell you the truth, I haven't seen a lot of Oregon this year to really break it down, but their pace metrics aren't out of this world. And it kind of shows in the low 60s being this, that's where this total is. A couple stats I just wanted to throw out before we get kind of conclusion here on the Pac-12 game. One, the North. This is obviously the North Division versus the South Division in the Pac-12. The North has dominated 8-1 in the last 9. I didn't realize that stat. So that's something to kind of keep in, but 2020 is a little bit different. And I think the South Division is getting a little bit better, but something I wanted to throw out there. Also, USC kind of coming from behind and doing it well, against Arizona State, and UCLA. All the games that you brought up. I mean, I guess you can kind of look at that two ways in terms of, well, maybe they're not that talented having to come from behind, but at the same time, they've gotten good quarterback play. I think, throwing the ball down the field is something USC does, and also punching the ball in to, yes, beat UCLA, but also more importantly for sports bettors, I was at the Circus Sportsbook. It went crazy. They covered. I mean, Clay Helton went from being one of the most disliked coaches out there by a fan base to, I was sitting around USC fans, Robbie, and they were like, hey, Clay's making up for a lot of, past harms to the program. So you never know what can happen with that. But I guess just kind of last question to you on this total, because it sounds like you're revving towards the over here and we can get it as low as 62. Do you think the pace will be there to kind of make it up? Or could these kind of be long drives by the Trojans and maybe by the Ducks as well? And then all of a sudden, we're later in the game and there just isn't that many possessions.
Yeah, I think a couple of counters that true. And obviously Joe Moorhead's offense, if we think back to Penn State, if we think to Mississippi State, it's a varied tempo type of deal. When they want to go quick, they do go quick. And then sometimes they rush to the line, as we see often in college football now, and then back off, look to the side, maybe run 18, 20 off the clock. USC with the pass-heavy offense, I think I would kind of lean toward, as far as pace is concerned, I guess I would counter that by saying every incomplete they throw stops the clock. So USC gets more total play drives. Maybe they don't go at a rapid pace, but you get more total plays and those types of things off during a game. And the explosive players on each side, Drew, I think is something that just can't be overlooked. When you're talking about USC with that receiving core of St. Brown, of Vaughns, Drake London, these guys that can make big plays, and an Oregon team that's been susceptible to big plays, and vice versa. On the other side, when Micah Pittman came back a couple of games ago for Oregon, that was a big deal for that wide receiving core. So you've got a lot of high-class explosive talent on both sides of the offense where the skill positions are concerned. C.J. Verdell could break one at any time. And as you mentioned with USC, Keaton Slovis, a guy who, as the year went on last year, I mean, USC at the end of the year last year, I don't think anybody wanted to play. They were so prolific throwing the ball. And it's be snowballing in that general direction again. I said they didn't do a lot as far as yardage with their scoring drives are concerned last week, but somehow USC finds their way to these 30-point totals or above in the majority of their games. So I think even if the pace isn't rapid fire, Kent State, right? That type of deal, I still think they're more than capable because they're efficient enough and explosive enough to get over.
Good stuff from Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. I'm on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. Guys, we got 3 games on Saturday. We're going to break down right now and a best bet as well. I guess What we should go in order of kickoff, Robbie. Or no, let's go in order of rotation. Rotation order, I guess, Robbie. We got AAC action here, guys, for the American Athletic Championship game, Robbie, on ABC Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific here. Tulsa at Cincinnati. Interesting note, guys, Cincinnati is the home team in Nippert Stadium. They will have limited fans as well. So something, if you're looking to bet the side, if not total, something to bring into account. 45.5 being the total here, Robbie. It's low, mid 40s, and for good reason. Both defenses are very good. We got Tulsa 8-0 in conference, excuse me. Actually, yeah, this in Nippert Stadium, excuse me, guys. But Tulsa, good defense. Cincinnati, good defense. Tulsa, some quarterback questions, though, in terms of injury. How healthy are these guys going to be? They were down to their third string quarterback not too many games ago. Cincinnati, I guess, an outside shot at the playoff. At least they think so. So we'll find out. But throw it over to you, Robbie. Tulsa versus Cincinnati. What are you looking to bet?
Yeah, let's start just with Nippert Stadium real quick, Drew, because it's an 8 o'clock Saturday night start time on the East Coast. So you would assume, and believe me, as I sit here in Pennsylvania, one state over from Ohio, we're prepping for 12 to 14 inches of snow tomorrow. So it's winter time here in this particular part of the country. However, on Saturday, the weather's not going to be that bad by the East Coast standards, right? You're going to get mid 30s, only a 30% chance of precipitation, and 10-mile-an-hour winds. So I would say that's really good weather for Cincinnati at this time of year. Interesting, Drew. We were supposed to see this game last week, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
wonder how much of that coronavirus cancellation was due to the fact that we're going to play you guys next week. We don't want to show you anything this week. You keep that stuff in the back of your head.
Sure.
For both of these teams, it'll be the first time they saw each other. Um, Opening number 16. A lot of money in on Tulsa early, down to 14. Total started 48 at Chris, down to 45 and a half right now. My power ratings sit right in the middle of those two numbers, the 16 down to 14. I made the game 15 and a half to open. So we can see that my number was in line with the bookmakers, and it's money right off the bat that carried this game down. For Cincinnati, it'll be the first game they've played in 28 days. The last time we saw them, they were beating UCF in what was a very, very important game. I think that week, Drew, you and I actually analyzed that particular contest. Cincinnati wins. I think UCF got the cover at
Mm-hmm.
that game. I think it was like a 38-33 game. When you go through, and I started with that game, when you go through the statistical lines of Cincy and UCF and Tulsa and UCF, you come out with a lot of the same. Cincinnati was a little bit better defensively. Cincinnati was a little bit better offensively, but there's nothing drastic. Both teams produced 3 sacks defensively. There was nothing major, no great statistical difference. No defense played massively better than the other against Central Florida. Neither offense played tremendously better than the other against Central Florida. Like I say, 3 sacks, 3 turnovers. A lot of these things were the same, which would lead you to believe that perhaps Tulsa, is in that vicinity of being as good as Cincinnati and maybe double digits worth taking. I know we've seen Tulsa perform well defensively against good offensive teams. Remember the Oklahoma State game early on, even though in that game, Oklahoma lost their starting quarterback, Spencer Sanders. I just talked about the UCF game. After that, the teams that Tulsa played in the AAC are not a who's who of good football teams. Played a bunch of bad football teams, and I could exclude Tulane from that list. That was the game you referred to, Drew, where they were down to their third string quarterback in that one. Davis Brin, who came in and lit it up and led a big comeback. We just
Played
talked
good.
about how USC's been coming back. Tulsa's been a cardiac team all season long. Dig some holes, come back and win. Dig some holes, come back and win. But the following week against Navy, Zach Smith, the starting quarterback, was back. That's 2 weeks ago. Zach Smith played the entire game, so they're good at quarterback here against Cincinnati. I think this game, when I looked at it, a couple of things here. Motivation, although both teams will be motivated because it's a championship game, I still think it slightly favors Cincinnati, not only for their chance at the 4-team playoff, which is slim to none, but there's a group here, and we'll talk about a couple of more of these teams in a game that we're going to do here, that are in line for the New Year's Six bowl game right now. And we're talking on Tuesday afternoon. The college football rankings come out later tonight. But last week's rankings had Cincinnati 8, and I think Coastal and ULL were the next two in line, maybe like 11 and 16 or something like that. So for Cincinnati, that New Year's Day 6 bowl bid is within their reach with a victory here over Tulsa. Question becomes, can they win by 14? Desmond Ridder against Zach Smith, I think that's where the game is partially won. Desmond Ridder has been so good. Drew, last time we talked about them, I talked about how explosive they've been from outside the red zone, scoring TDs like crazy from outside the red zone. Against UCF, it slowed down a little bit, but Ridder's legs, Ridder's arm was tremendous again in that game. I think he threw for 338. The numbers he's posted in their last 6 games are just off the charts. I didn't realize Desmond Ridder could play this way for this extended period of time he has. It's probably too much for Tulsa to overcome. As the Cincinnati defense is probably too much for Tulsa to overcome. This, to me, has the feeling of a game where Tulsa hangs around, and then gets worn out. I think that their offense is limited, and the numbers that they've stockpiled offensively come off of really, really bad teams. Not that Cincinnati's don't come off of bad teams because they play in the same conference. Or at least bad defenses. But to me, they just have a little bit more. They're a better rushing attack. They're better at the quarterback position. They're better at the wide receiver position. I don't see that type of explosiveness in Tulsa. Boy, I just don't know. Central Florida only got 349 total yards against the Cincinnati defense. What's Tulsa going to get? If they're held to 300 or less in this game, they could lose this one. 27-10. Generally thinking, or a general rule of thumb, right, is when you have a total this low and a double-digit dog this big, well, if you think the dog's going to cover, you're playing under. But not necessarily so, right? Because 30-13 is an under with Cincinnati winning. And these are scores that you could see happening, 27-10, 30-13, stuff like that. I'm not quite there yet, but I do think Cincinnati's a better team. I just don't trust them enough to lay this big of a number, even though this year has kind of been an exception to the Cincinnati rule, and they have covered. They've blown people out when they have been big chalk this season. So maybe I could look to Cincinnati. The over-under is in a really good place because defensive scores can help you out, and both of these teams are more than capable. Like I say, it's Tuesday. I'm not there yet. Maybe a small lean towards Cincy. Maybe I'll even look at first half here, Drew. If Tulsa comes out fired up, maybe the first half price is worth taking. So there's a lot of counter arguments I could make here, which should be a really good game. But I don't think Cincinnati's going to let this opportunity to play in a New Year's Six bowl get away from them. So I think they're the winner. Just a question of how much they win by.
Yeah, good analysis there, Robbie. I agree with you. I think Cincinnati's defense is just going to be a tough matchup for Tulsa's offense. I haven't seen enough out of Tulsa to think that they're going to be able to drive the ball down on this defense and score. Like you talked about, I mean, UCF's offense, which is great. They're kind of a one-unit team, all offense, and they struggled against the Cincinnati defense. They were able to put up points, but it's not like they lit them up, whereas Cincinnati, was able to go down the field against UCF. Now, Tulsa's defense is a lot better than UCF's. I don't think it's as dominant as Cincinnati's. I lean towards the favorite. And like you said, with this low of a total, it's tough to lean that way. But I know a lot of guys out there are liking this Tulsa team. I don't disagree. I think this total is also a tough bet here. If Tulsa's able to score, Robbie, I think they're going to get up and over this total pretty easily, because I'm pretty sure Cincinnati, you talked about Ridder at the quarterback position. He's played very, very good. I mean, making things happen with his feet. He's been decent with his arm as well. So the Cincinnati team is ranked highly a top 10 team for a reason, and I think they're well deserving of it. I think that they could hold their own, with maybe the second level of teams out there in college football. Maybe not the Alabamas of the world, but maybe that second level there. And Tulsa's a really good defense themselves. So I think weather is something to watch, guys, as this week goes on, especially if you're looking to bet this total sitting in the mid 40s. If weather is an issue, I'm interested in this under. And if it's not, I think it comes down to if Tulsa can move the ball. It might be a little bit too low here, Robbie, but lean towards the over if the weather is good. So we got 2 games left here. The ACC championship game and the Sun Belt championship game. So we'll break them down here. We got the Atlantic Coast Conference here, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific kick on ABC. Clemson versus Notre Dame. Interesting note here. This one is a neutral site game, neutral in quotation marks. Charlotte, North Carolina. That's Bank of America Stadium, where the Carolina Panthers play their home games. It's the ACC championship game here, guys. Number 2 versus number 3, Clemson versus Notre Dame. Looks like Clemson minus 10.5 point favorites here, Robbie. 60 being the total in a rematch, Rob. This is an interesting handicap here. I don't know. I kind of like the dog.
Yeah, I'm with you, Drew. I think, and for a couple of reasons here. And what sticks out first and foremost in my head when I look to side with Notre Dame is the defensive effort they put forth in the second half against North Carolina. North Carolina shut out in the second half. Notre Dame forces 6 punts on 7 possessions. I think the other one was a North Carolina turnover on downs. They did nothing against them. Once they got adjusted, I mean, North Carolina hit them quick, first couple of drives. Then Notre Dame got adjusted, and you can't tell me that Clemson's offense is more explosive than North Carolina's. I mean, you could sell me on the fact that maybe they're equals. Obviously, Clemson with Trevor Lawrence is a great offense, but there's no other offense in the land that I think supersedes that of North Carolina's this year with Sam Howell. That running game, that receiving core, that offensive line, they show it week in and week out. They went for 66 last week in what was supposed to be a competitive game. They made it as non-competitive as could be against Miami of Florida from the opening kickoff. So that second half, Notre Dame defensive performance is first and foremost in my notes here when it comes to trying to take Notre Dame with 10.5 points in this game. Now, the counter to that, what you have to try and figure out here, first time around, we remember the 47-40 Notre Dame win. We remember Trevor Lawrence wasn't there, and Clemson either entered the game or during the game wound up without 4 defensive starters. So Clemson's got to be healthier on defense. There's no question about it. But I like the fact that Notre Dame got to play Clemson regular season, got to get used to the speed of Clemson. Remember when Notre Dame's entered these games in the past, Drew, within the last, recent history, 5 years, when they've played Ohio State or Clemson in these big, I think they played both of those teams in Final Four type games, right? And they got blown out just because they weren't fast. They couldn't handle the speed, but Notre Dame handled the speed and answered with some of their own. As far as physical offensive line play is concerned, it was the first time when they beat Clemson in overtime that you actually thought to yourself, you know what, Notre Dame can hang with these guys. And if I watch it and I can see it, certainly the players in that locker room believe it. And second time around here, they're going to have to match Clemson's focus coming into this game because Clemson certainly is going to have revenge on their mind. But for Notre Dame, in my estimation, Drew, there's just as much focus because they've been that team that hasn't been able to get to the elite level, and Brian Kelly's trying to get them there. Now, how much, I don't factor it into my handicap, excuse me, but the fact that their defensive coordinator, Clark Lee, just took the Vanderbilt job. Now, he's going to coordinate this game, and certainly he was the guy who ran this defense the first time around. So they've got a specific game plan. They got to see a lot of what Clemson does offensively. I don't know what Dabo can whip out of the playbook that's new in a 47-40 overtime game. They showed just about everything except their star quarterback. Even if Trevor Lawrence has an exceptional game here, Drew, I really think that Ian Book, the ground game, the receiving core for Notre Dame is not exactly uh, deep and explosive or home run type threats, but they got good hands. They find first down markers. They make catches. They keep chains moving. To me, and I don't think this point spread is out of line, believe me, because my power ratings make Clemson on the neutral field here in Charlotte a 10-point favorite. But I would rather take the 10.5 here than lay it with Notre Dame. I just don't know that the return of Trevor Lawrence and the return of the defensive starters make up that difference. It would have to be a 17.5 point difference. I don't know that it makes it up. I like Notre Dame's defense. And I think one thing I do believe, Drew, is we'll see a lower scoring game this time. I mean, not that, we were looking for 87 points, but I talk in terms of the total in this contest being 60. I think you got a way better chance of seeing under here than you do over, from the perspective that both of these teams have seen each other once around. They'll make the adjustments, especially on the defensive side. One rule of handicapping that I've always used throughout my career is coaches in sports in a rematch, generally, not even generally, I would say all the time. I don't make many blanket statements, but I think this is one of them. Coaches love to fix or look to fix what went wrong the first time. And what went wrong the first time was both defenses. I think they'll be better here. I could actually see an under in this game.
Okay, good stuff, Robbie. And yeah, I'm excited for that one. Talk about the quarterbacks. I think both really good quarterbacks. Sometimes I feel like Ian Book doesn't get the respect that he should. I think he's a very, very good college quarterback. I think he's the winningest quarterback in Notre Dame history, which, I mean, when you start talking about Notre Dame history, that's saying something in itself. And, I'm surprised he's not getting more Heisman talk, really, behind an undefeated ACC team. I think it would be cool for kind of Irish fans out there, because for college football fans, it's always like, oh, well, what if Notre Dame was in a major conference? How would they do? Sure enough, they sign a one-year deal. They find themselves undefeated in the championship game. If they're able to pull this off, Robbie, that would be a pretty good, feather in the hat to be like, hey, we were in a conference and see what happened. We won it. We beat, the big bad Clemson. We won the ACC. Now we're going back to, solo, not in a conference, making more money. And we kind of proved everybody wrong here. But you're right. You talked about a lot of things. One, when people bring up, Notre Dame got ran over by Alabama. What was that, 5 or 6 years ago in the national? This is a different Notre Dame team, Robbie. I mean, the defensive front alone is bigger, faster. They're not going to get pushed around like that. The linebacker, you can just tell in the recruiting that Brian Kelly has done there in South Bend. It's a lot better. It's in the numbers. It's in the eye test when you watch them. I don't think they're going to get run over at all. They obviously didn't last time in beating Clemson. Now with Trevor Lawrence back, how much does that change things? I think it does change things, Robbie. I think that actually, him throwing the ball down the field, and not just a freshman quarterback out there on the road, I think that was a tough situation for him. But I think Notre Dame catching the 10.5 here, they lose by 10 and you still cash your bet with a Notre Dame team that's looked really good all season long, with a good quarterback, with a good coach, no health issues, big health issues anyway. I think Notre Dame's the side here. Totals wise, sitting at 60. I could see what you're saying in terms of leaning under in the rematch, kind of playing safe football here in a championship game. Keep in mind, Clemson can't lose this and make the playoff. If Clemson loses, they're likely out. So this is a huge game for Clemson. Notre Dame, if they lose, it kind of depends what opinion you want to go here, Robbie. Some people say they might be out. I don't know. I think that's a tough draw if they're out and, they beat everybody on their schedule. But I guess, playing that game, motivation and what's going to happen, I think that's a tough handicap. But overall, I just think the 10.5 is too much here. I think the market is kind of overcompensated for Trevor Lawrence coming back, and the in the rematch kind of favoring Clemson here. So I like Notre Dame plus the 10.5. Guys, we got one game left. He's Robbie Veno. I'm Drew Martin. This is the Best Damn College Football Show, Tuesdays, 11 a.m. Pacific time on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. Come and join us live in the chat box. If you're watching on replay, feel free to drop a line in the comments below. And if you're liking the content, please smash the like button. We got one game left here, guys, talking with the number one handicapper at wagertalk.com in terms of totals and top 2 handicapper in terms of all plays released in 2020. So we got the Sun Belt Championship game here, Robbie. My favorite game on the card, 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific kick will get us kind of started here on the Saturday card. We got Louisiana versus Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers versus the Ragin' Cajuns. In terms of mascots, maybe probably the best matchup of the weekend. Ragin' Cajuns versus the Chanticleers. Number 19 ranked Louisiana versus number 13th ranked Coastal Carolina. We got Coastal -3 in the hook. Favorites here, 55 being the total, Robbie. I'll throw it over to you. Sun Belt Championship game. This is a rematch as well. And that was a close game the first time they played. Don't just go off the box score. They went back and forth in that one, Robbie, in a Thursday nighter that I was on the wrong side. But what do you think happens here on Saturday for the Sun Belt Championship?
Yeah, it took a 40-yard field goal with 4 seconds left in the game for Coastal to pull that one out. Went down the field, 61 yards, their final drive. They get themselves the win. Want to go over a couple numbers here, Drew, real quick from that game, because I think that game, when we're talking about Sun Belt, these are the 2 best teams. I would argue, and probably win the argument, that Billy Napier recruits better at ULL than they do at Coastal. I think since he's been there, he gets the best of the Sun Belt in the recruiting wars each and every year. If we had Ralph here, he could probably verify that. But so on paper, you have the better athletes on one side and perhaps the better team unit on the other side, right? Coastal's been an extremely good team overall all season long. Young quarterback, top-notch running back, really good defense, a head coach that's energetic and motivates all the time. So it's a really good matchup. But let's point out these numbers. These 2 teams played each other first time around. Coastal Carolina gains 414 total yards in that game. ULL gains 413. 1 yard separated these 2 teams. Now, the time of possession war in that game, and when you hear people argue for the Coastal side this week, they'll argue that Coastal's a ball control team. They'll keep it out of the more dynamic team's hands. They did that the first time around. Time of possession numbers in that first game, Drew, Coastal 38 minutes and 11 seconds. ULL only had the ball for 21:49. So there's almost a 17-minute difference. And there's a 17 total play difference. 72 plays run by Coastal, only 55 by ULL. Somehow on 55 plays and 21 plus minutes of possession, ULL found their way to 27 points against this really good defense. So this is a tight matchup here. Both of these teams, if the unexpected happens and Cincinnati were to lose to Tulsa, these are the next 2 teams in line to get that bid as far as rankings are concerned. Now, again, later tonight, Tuesday night, we'll see exactly where this week's rankings fall. And certainly BYU, the Mountain West title game, Boise State and San Jose State could have a say in this if things fall the right way for them. We'll have to see. But as far as the rankings were concerned, when we're talking, these are the next 2 teams in line. So there's a lot at stake here. For one of these 2 to be selected to a New Year's Day 6 Bowl, that'd be a big feather in either's cap. Coastal has the undefeated season going. ULL would love nothing more than to take that away from them. They're both built on the power running game, right? Actually, for Coastal, they're built more on like an old school option attack offense, but they still do it with a powerful offensive line, and they don't run away from you. They run at you. Billy Napier, of course, was a wide receiver coach at Alabama and brought Alabama's power spread with him and with Trey Regis and Elijah Mitchell and company. They do run head on right at you. I think that the quarterback play here, Drew, I like Levi Lewis. And not that I don't like Grayson McCall, young kid who's really blossomed throughout the season. but Levi Lewis can make plays at opportune times. So this is going to be a real tough game here for Coastal. Last week, I'm going to take last week's game against Troy, where they allowed 38 points and barely won, and throw it out the window because the situation there was just crazy for Coastal to be coming off the BYU win and to have ULL for the Sun Belt Championship on deck. That's a real tough spot for Coastal. They should be well prepared here. As we talked about with Notre Dame and Clemson, there's plenty of film to watch in preparation for this game. Weather's going to be good. It's a 3:30 Saturday afternoon kick with temperatures in the low mid 50s. Of these four games we talked about, Drew, there's really no weather situations going on except for the cold in Cincinnati, where maybe Tulsa would be the most affected team out of any of the 8 that we've talked about here, because Tulsa, coming from Oklahoma, maybe doesn't like 30-degree temps. I don't know. But here, I would say that Coastal and ULL are in for another real good game. There's part of me that says Coastal Carolina's a team of destiny, so to speak, and that they can get it done. But the other part of me tells me ULL is probably the better team personnel-wise, and I just don't know if Coastal can carry this out week after week after week with some narrow escapes the last 2 weeks, albeit situationally based last week. I just think ULL's had a lot of prep time here. They remember that game losing at the final gun. I would like to take the points with ULL here and probably will when it comes around to it. But there's been some money, early on here towards that direction, right? It went from 4.5 opener down to 3.5. So certainly the guys who got 4.5 are in better shape. But 3.5, more than a field goal for a game like this, I think is worth taking. So I'll probably lean ULL.
Robbie, I agree with a lot of what you said. I'm actually surprised by it, especially on your quarterback analysis. I think a lot of people, McCall is his name for the Coastal Carolina quarterback, they like him and he is good. He don't want to take anything away from him. He is only a freshman, guys, redshirt freshman, I believe, but he doesn't have the athletic ability that Lewis has for Louisiana. I think Lewis is riding a little bit under the radar here in how good he is. If you haven't seen the Raging Cajuns play, guys, he wears number 1. He's a lefty. He's back there. He's really hard to contain, and he's actually pretty accurate down the field. I think that there's just more of a playmaker aspect on the Louisiana offensive side that I like here. I think Louisiana wins this game outright. I bet them, personally, plus the points here. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised that there's more people out there that have seen a lot of these two teams play and like the Louisiana side. Recruiting wise, you're right, Robbie. I mean, outside of the offensive line, which Coastal Carolina, for it kind of set up well for them this year with a lot of older guys starting on their offensive line, and they are good. But outside of that unit, Louisiana has the more talented roster, in my opinion. They've recruited better. Billy Napier there in Lafayette, he's done a great job. We've talked about it before in terms of people knowing recruiting rankings from Florida and Georgia and Texas and California. Depending on the year per capita, Louisiana is actually the best state, depending on the year, to recruit per capita. And it shows when this team plays Sun Belt teams, and they've kind of been underpriced, especially the last 3 games. Granted, 2 of them were against, South Alabama and Louisiana Monroe. They still covered big spreads, 70-20 against ULM, by the way. So they will run it up if they have the chance to. And then against App State, beating down App State as underdogs there in their last time out. So going up against Coastal Carolina, that, yes, beat BYU in arguably the biggest game of the college football season, but then it set them up against Troy, which Troy was getting a lot healthier here. Talking about last week, I like Troy. I actually bet him personally just because of the situation, Robbie, and Coastal having to go down there to play a 500 Troy team. But Troy was a lot healthier, and Troy's a team that in the trenches could match up well with Coastal Carolina. They're not going to get pushed around. That's the same as Louisiana Lafayette. See, I always look to bet Coastal Carolina against the teams like in the Sun Belt, like I'm just going off the top of my head here, like South Alabama, even like Georgia State, where offensive and defensive fronts aren't their their top units, because then Coastal Carolina gets that push up front, and you just can't beat them that way, because that's where they excel at. Whereas Louisiana is going to be able to go toe to toe with them, even on the road here. Good weather. I actually think the good weather helps Louisiana, because it will let Lewis make some more plays with his feet and throw the ball down the field. So overall, I like Louisiana here, Robbie. I bet him, personally on with the points, but I wouldn't be surprised if I bet him money line as well, probably sooner rather than later. So I think that's all we got for these 4 games. Robbie, anything you want to throw out in conclusion here before we get to best bets?
I'll say this about that game, Drew, because I had a couple of extra notes here that I didn't really get to, but really fast. Motivationally, I know Coastal has the undefeated season and the New Year's Day 6 to look for, but I almost think ULL's got more motivationally here, Drew, because they got to this doorstep last year and lost to App State in this title game. And there's a lot of that group that's back this year. A lot of these kids that are going to play went through that loss, and it was a tough loss. It was a high-scoring game, tough loss. So I think that's it. And then we talk a lot about the Coastal win over BYU. But let's not forget that BYU didn't find out about that game until 72 hours before kickoff, had to fly across country. Their equipment truck gets there the day of the game, basically. So there was a lot of extra things in Coastal Carolina's favor. Again, I don't want to take anything away from the win, but I just want to say that there were some circumstances there that did favor them. BYU is a very good football team. Give them credit, but I think ULL is probably the right side here.
I agree, Robbie. And talking about the last time they played, guys, one thing I forgot to say, Robbie talked a lot about the possession time really favoring the Chanticleers. And just watching it, I did bet on Louisiana the first time and lost. Those third downs, they knocked down it seemed like every third down. It was like 3rd and 5 up, Coastal gets it by a yard. 3rd and 3, Coastal gets it by a yard. They just winded down the clock. Not a lot of possessions in that game. And it's something that we got to watch out for back in the Raging Cajuns here, Robbie. They got to get off the field on third down. If we lose this bet on the Raging Cajuns, it's because Coastal's able to do that again and just make this a low possession game, grind out third downs, score touchdowns. And sure enough, you'll find yourself down in the fourth quarter. And that's what happened last time to the Raging Cajuns. So we got to watch out for that. Third downs are going to be huge for the ULL defense. So, Robbie, best bet time. Guys, follow him on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. I'm on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. If you're watching on replay, that's cool. Please drop a comment below and smash the like button. And huge shout out to the chat box. Blake saying Raging Cajuns ready to roll. Johnny Outlaw, our boy, Joe, Andrew G in the house, Lee Johnson, all you guys, Booga Bets, welcome in. Thanks for joining us, and throw out your best bets for this weekend, guys, as we will do right now. Robbie, you want to lead us off here with best bet for the weekend?
Yeah, I'll go right back to the top of the card where we started, Drew, and say that I think Oregon and USC get over the 62.5, I think is the more prevailing number this morning. Could get a lot of 62s last night. In this instance, you got to find your way to a 35-28 game in order to be safe. I think if you wait till later in the week, you're probably going to have to find your way to a 34-31 game, get the 65 to get over this number, because I see the number going that way. But I don't think that's, unreasonable either, Drew. You've got good conditions. You've got both of these teams compressed into a very short season. There's not a lot of time this year for either of these staffs to make corrections. What's wrong with their teams is going to be what's wrong with their teams again. What's good about their teams is going to be what's good about their teams again. So for me, I think this game gets 65 or better. So give me the USC-Oregon game, Oregon-USC up and over that number of 62.5.
All right, Robbie Veno, Oregon, USC over 60. There is a 62 out there, Robbie, but it's primarily 62.5. What should we do?
Let's go up to 62.5 and take it over.
Widely available numbers here on the Best Damn College Football Show, guys. So we'll go 62.5 over Oregon, USC. Robbie, I got a couple. I fired away on this card. I really did. I mean, I like that ULL Coastal, but you know what? I'll add a little flair here, and I'll go off of the games that we talked about. I'll go 2-4-1, 2-4-2, Boise State, San Jose State. The Spartans, they've been great this season, Robbie. Under the radar, good defensive front, good quarterback play, good coach, by the way. I'm going with the San Jose State Spartans plus 6.5. There's already been some early money, guys, on the Spartans. There's no sevens left, but I still like them 6.5. And to tell you the truth, I wouldn't talk you off of a money line here. Big plus price on the San Jose State Spartans to win the Mountain West Championship game over Boise State. So that will be my best bet. San Jose State plus 6.5. Robbie Veno's got Oregon, USC over 62.5. Robbie, anything you want to throw out there before we shut this down?
Yeah, home game for San Jose State, right? Not that they'll have fans there in that part of the country. You're not allowed, but certainly home game for them and a big one for them. Been a great team all season long, Drew. I totally agree with you there. But yeah, I do this at the end of every week for about the last month. But one last time before we sign off, just want to thank the audience. This has been a great season to do this show, and we're not done yet. We've got bowl games coming, but for me, just like to thank everybody that watches us each and every week, coming back and enjoying the content that we're providing here. Hopefully, we've steered you guys to a winning season. Hopefully, we'll continue to get you through the holiday season, bowl season with a bunch of wins as well. That's what we're here to do. But we appreciate the audience. Thank you guys for watching.
For sure. And welcome in Paco. Welcome in Marcus. Always good to see you guys here. Johnny Outlaw as well. So, guys, yeah, we got Oregon, USC over 62.5. San Jose State plus 6.5 for the best bets here, guys. Watch me now. Welcome in as well. Robbie, I guess just to end it here, best damn college football show. You're still ready to rock next week, though. Maybe some bowl game look aheads.
Yeah, I think we should. In fact, by the time we get on the air again next week, Drew, I think that Monday there is a bowl game or two. We might have missed a couple by the time we get on next week, but we can certainly go through a bunch of the bowl games. There'll be some are unnamed yet. Some teams are unnamed yet. We'll have to wait till Sunday for everything to be decided, but I think we should. It's been a good show, and I think we can run it through bowls. It's my favorite time of year, so I don't mind doing it, Drew.
Okay, me neither. And yeah, I'm just making sure before we say, we'll be back next week. But yeah, we'll do bowl game look aheads on the next Best Damn College Football show. So reach out to Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports, myself on Twitter at Drew Martin Betts. And I'll be back in Florida, Robbie. But let's break down some bowl games next week, same time, same place, right here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. I know one I want to break down with you. That's the Boca Raton Bowl's BYU versus UCF, right?
That's a good one.
That's going to be a good one. Let's break that one down, and then we can leave it open to what everybody else wants to break down. But yeah, that will be fun next week. So some bowl game breakdowns, guys, next Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific time here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. So for Robbie Veno, check them out, guys. WagerTalk.com, the number one handicapper in 2020 in totals, the number two handicapper in overall profit produced. WagerTalk.com. If you're looking for a handicap service, Robbie Veno throws out the volume, throws out the winners. He's had a great 2020. So check him out there. WagerTalk.com, handicapper page, Robbie Veno. We'll be back next week, guys.